A warm good evening to our viewers. I'm Matthias Aufiko, and I welcome you to the Evening Review Show. Well, electricity matters has been giving us headaches the past few weeks. Electricity bills are soaring. You spend $100, and the amount of units you see on the receipts don't quite correlate. So those are some of the matters we want to break down tonight. And for that, we have in studio the spokesperson of the Electricity Control Board, the regulator, the entity that decides how much we have to fork out to keep the lights on at home. And for that, we have in studio Mr. Ferdinand Molale. Good evening and welcome, sir.
Evening, Matthias. Thank you for inviting the regulator to the evening review, and evening to your viewers out there.
No, it's good to have you here. We've had calls over the past few days from our audience to have your team in studio just to come break down some of these issues. And for that, we're glad that you made time to be with us here tonight. Let's start the conversation. Not so long ago, the ECB approved several tariff hikes to some of your stakeholders, who then in turn also then supply the country with electricity. And there's been sort of an uproar from the public. Some saying perhaps the regulator is not consumer conscious. The country is already going through tough financial times and so on. And it's now compounded by rising electricity costs. What do you have to say around those concerns from the public?
Thank you, Matthias. We, as a regulator, also came across the concerns that you are speaking to. Mm-hmm. We also have stakeholder engagements. We also, at times, also have direct engagements with consumers of electricity out there. And the conversation hardly goes by without mentioning the tariffs, electricity tariffs. I agree with you. I live in Namibia. I can feel the economic hardship, the tough times that are biting. One cannot reason that away. Mm-hmm. However, while this is the case, and one can actually not sometimes run away from reality in terms of the economics at play. Mm-hmm. The economic hardship is not brought about by the electricity tariffs adjusted by the regulator. The two are not at all symbiotic or mutually going together. Mm-hmm. Now, for us as a regulator, while that is the case, we still have a responsibility to ensure that our distribution utilities ensures a steady and firm supply of electricity to electricity users. Now, if as a regulator, we would neglect this responsibility, mm-hmm. the very end consumers that are complaining that tariffs are high would be affected. They would be the first to say, why is there no electricity? Mm-hmm. For this product, this commodity, which in itself is a critical enabler, to be present, to be delivered, the regulator, as per our regulatory regime, needs on an annual basis to make a tariff adjustment. This tariff adjustment simply allows our utilities to have sufficient funds mm-hmm. to operate, to look after that infrastructure, to ensure that this commodity that we call electricity mm-hmm. is distributed and arrives at the doorsteps of electricity users. Mm-hmm. If we don't make that adjustment, then we would all be negatively affected. Yeah. And in terms of those breakdowns, you're pretty spot on. The first tariff adjustment that we announced in May was for bulk consumers, the price at which they buy electricity from NamPower. Mm-hmm. And then as per our regulatory regime, they in turn, as you rightfully put it, now have to individually apply to the regulator for their tariffs. So they also need to be looked after in ensuring that they apply for a tariff that is able to sustain them and not to negatively affect them, given the price at which they are buying this very commodity from Nampower.
Yeah. Would you say, as a regulator, your entity is doing enough to balance the needs of those utilities and the concerns of the public?
I like the fact that earlier on you actually mentioned the fact that the regulator is consumer conscious. Now, this accommodating nature of the regulator that you just described can be located in how it applies itself when those tariff applications are submitted by our utilities. For example, the public wants a no tariff increment. That's what the public wants. And we are saying, while that wish is out there, there is a need to ensure that the light stays on. And that will only happen when we apply ourselves correctly by adjusting tariffs. And then in the case of consumers, if I just take 2 steps back, during the 2019-20 financial year, there was no tariff passed by the regulator onto the end consumers. And the subsequent year, there was a tariff decrease. And during the 21-22 financial year, there was a nominal adjustment of 2.29. And last year, the bulk utility applied for a double-digit application. And the regulator, being the consumer-conscious regulator that it is, actually ended up adjusting that tariff to a single-digit tariff, 8.29.
But were you then not in that process disadvantaging those utilities?
No, not at all. What normally happens is the utilities would sit as a team, speak to their needs during that financial year, from salaries to maintenance of their fleet, of their plants, of their lines. They will sit as a team, speak to their needs, and then take that application, submit it to the regulator. The regulator in turn will now apply itself on those needs. In other words, on behalf of the consumer, because this tariff is passed on to the consumer, the consumer conscious regulator that we are would now apply itself on the application and see where is it where the utility is trying to pass a cost onto the consumer which shouldn't. There are instances where, for example, we disallow some of the costs that are proposed in the application. There are instances also where the regulator, in applying itself, would be frank in its conversation with the utilities to say, we will reduce this need here or this request here. There were also instances, for example, where the regulator would put it to the utility to say, no, we will not allow this. Can you utilize your reserves because you have healthy savings? So the regulator's conversation is in actual fact such, like you just correctly put it, to balance things for the entire value chain. While we would be making sure that the end consumer is not negatively affected, we also make sure that what we pass, what the tariff that we adjust to our utilities is able to sustain the utility during that financial year. And I can also take a step back and perhaps reflect on the assistance that the regulator activated in cushioning the end consumer against tariff shocks. There is what is referred to as the long-run marginal cost. That fund is an active fund which the regulator can at times also look at to cushion the end consumer. For example, when NamPower applies, in the instance that I just referred to where it was a double-digit application or request, and the regulator ends up adjusting a single-digit tariff, the regulator would at times also then activate this fund to cushion the end consumer. Some funds from this fund can be availed to say, this request here, okay, it's fine, we will disallow this, we'll see where we can find that 60 million, that 40 million, or that 100 million that you are requesting here. But in our view, we will disallow this. And the regulator then will activate that fund to cushion the end consumer. So I agree with you, and I like the fact that you highlighted at the beginning that we are a consumer-conscious regulator.
Yeah, and just before we head to the short break, I just want you to gather your thoughts around the workings of regional electricity distributors, and also the issue of new generation, just to improve the capacity of electricity generation in the country. So we'll head for a short break, and we'll be back to continue the conversation on that note. To our viewers, just stay tuned. We'll head for a short break quickly, and we'll be back for this insightful conversation.
Paints has established a 67-year Namibian legacy, creating personalized paint solutions that blend quality and innovation for the Namibian people. We pride ourselves in being a 100% Namibian-owned company, investing in our country and our people by employing and empowering true Namibians. With every brushstroke, Neo Paints commits to our quality guarantee and always delivering a coat of excellence. At Neo Paints, we always stay true to our country. We are as Namibian as you.
Well, welcome back from the short break. Mr. Molale, we still continue to import huge volumes of electricity into the country, which certainly also plays a role on the price that the end consumer has to pay. What is being done in the background to ensure that local generation capacity is boosted?
Thank you for that question, Matthias. I certainly also agree. It's an open secret. As Namibians, we are cognizant of this reality, that we are dependent, reliant on electricity import. It's an open secret. As a country, we've also gone on to say that reliance is over 50%, and we wish as a country to reduce that reliance through local generation.
Is there a target and the time frame for that target?
You're quite correct. You're quite correct. It would appear as if in the background, as you put it, or behind the scene, there's nothing happening, but actually quite a lot. Our National Integrated Resource Plan was just revised. The revised plan 2023 has now commenced and is being put into operation. This 20-year horizon plan actually speaks to those modalities, including to fast track our efforts as a country to boost local generation, so that we can actually use that local generation to lessen the reliance or dependence on imports. And in this regard, the previous NIRP was supported by a ministerial determination where over 200 megawatts of local generation was activated. From that determination and the revised NIRP, there has been a lot of plans actually that are under construction as we speak. Some headed by IPPs, and with the IPPs we are talking about 180 megawatts that we anticipate from 2024 onwards to come online. There are various projects that are out there, solar projects, renewable energy projects, and we also have a 5 megawatt wind project at Luderitz, which will also add to this capacity that I just pointed out. But in addition to this 180 megawatt, we also have key projects that our utility Nampower is spearheading. We have the Anigas 2 project. It's a 50 megawatt project. We have the Kan solar PV project, which is a 20 megawatt project. And these two projects are anticipated to actually come online in 2024. So there's a lot of activity taking place at the moment. And in addition to that, what we have seen as a regulator is also the emergence of what is referred to in our industry as prosumers, producers that are consumers through our net metering program or net metering rules. And I mean, what we've seen as a regulator is what the prosumers are feeding into the grid from their installed rooftop systems is also picking up. So we are positive as a regulator with the support of government through our line ministry that from 2024 onwards, we will certainly see some change. There'll certainly be some movement. But what I need to underline, again, also speaking to, if I borrow from your words, what is happening behind the scene is the fact that all these developers, these IPPs, and even Nampower with their key projects, they all appreciate the need to actually come on board in terms of availing that electricity and getting that electricity into the grid so that those megawatts are actually utilized. In terms of our mainstay plant, which is Ruacana, we have been fortunate, unfortunate rather, pardon me, as a country. Ruacana is a run-of-the-river plant. Yeah. In other words, if we receive good rains, those good inflows would mean then increased generation for this plant of ours. Yeah. But unfortunately, as we all know as Namibians, we have not been that fortunate in terms of rain, whether this current calendar year or the previous calendar year. We have not been that fortunate. So as a result, what we witnessed then was a reduced output from this mainstay plant, Ruacana. But in the meantime, behind the scene, engineers, Nampower engineers, are hard at work on a daily basis, maintaining this plant, looking forward to those good inflows when we would receive good rains, to ensure that Ruacana's output is at its optimal best and satisfactory in terms of local generation for ourselves as Namibians as well.
Yeah. But if you follow the climate change conversation globally, the rain forecast doesn't look so good.
We are anticipatory and proactive as a regulator to that, because that proactiveness that I'm speaking to is something that we ourselves are aware of and move or raise in our conversations with our utilities and also the IPPs. Hence then this deliberate move that I described to ensure that those developers, those investors, those IPPs actually put hands to wheel or shoulder to wheel in terms of realization of those megawatts from local generation.
Yeah.
So as a regulator, in facilitating that and that needed development in the industry, our licensing regime has been accommodating. We see a lot of applications.
Yeah.
We speak to those applications, and it's various technologies that are being put to the regulator for consideration. I mean, earlier on I mentioned solar PV and wind. There are also some who are speaking to CSP with storage. So it's a conversation that we also move in our conversations or discussions with investors and developers.
Over the years, we've, as a country, really dilly-dallied as far as investment into electricity infrastructure is concerned. Indecisive, if you ask me. Several projects left hanging, and we're not really sure which direction we wanted to go over the years. Do you think this has cost us as a country and landed us where we are today? We are effectively scrambling right now to get our house in order.
I'm not so sure to what extent you have your finger on that dilly-dallying and that scrambling. I'm not so sure to what extent. But what I can recall as a team of the regulator is these efforts that I just described. However, if you are speaking to bigger projects that have been part of our conversations as Namibians, for example, whether you talk about the Kudu gas plan, or if you are referring to the Kudu gas plan, if you are referring to conversations of why not incorporate nuclear, I'm not so sure if there has been scrambling or dilly-dallying at all, because there has been constant, ongoing conversations on the inclusion of these technologies. But
Some of those conversations are more than 30 years now.
You're pretty spot on. But the conversations would speak to the practicalities and the funding needed, and which funding, unfortunately, as a country, we cannot wish away. That funding ought to be availed for this, the inclusion of these technologies to be tested, to be realized. So I'm not so sure whether it's really dilly-dallying or scrambling. I'm not so sure.
Yeah.
But what I can recollect as a member of the regulator is that, and I mean, this has been confirmed on numerous occasions also by our energy minister, to say the conversations are still ongoing on the inclusion of these technologies. So for us, it's just an aspect of funding.
Yeah.
Once that funding gets availed and we speak to lubricating and oiling our gears in terms of application of these technologies, then I don't think we would hesitate to include it.
Yeah.
After all, if one takes a look at the NIRP, that integrated resource plan that I spoke to is accommodating of various technologies to ensure that Namibia, at the end of the day, is energy self-sufficient.
Yeah.
So I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure if
Okay,
there has been.
Just as we head towards the end, the issue of the REDs, there has been complaints over the years regarding their status in the entire electricity system, whether there's a need for them, whether they are good to have or not. What's the regulator's position on that? And I understand there are several applications to add more rates to the electricity system, I think in the south and then centrally also. And what is the status of those?
The importance of REDs in our distribution sector cannot be overemphasized. That's for sure. We've also come across the sentiments that you just described as a regulator, where some end consumers out there would refer to them as middlemen. They are milking end consumers.
Some of those concerns also come from municipalities and town councils.
Now, what we as a regulator basically view is important is the fact that the REDs play an important role, very, very important role. In fact, in areas where we have REDs, what we have witnessed since Namibia pioneered this concept of REDs is a huge, tremendous development in those areas. Yeah. We've also witnessed tremendous investment by these REDs in the areas that they operate in. From building classrooms to expanding electricity to rural areas to sponsoring networking platforms like trade fairs and those. And what we've seen is also growth in terms of network expansion and maintenance of network. Okay. In areas where we don't have REDs, we have challenges, tremendous challenges. Yeah. And in fact, we are aware of what happened just last month, where our utility called onto those areas and consumers in non-RED areas to actually come to the party in terms of paying what they owe. Yeah. And in some areas where we have REDs, if one compare the debt, it's actually not comparable. Yeah. So we as a regulator are supportive of the 1988 EDI summit and the subsequent EDI summits resolutions to say we need to have a solid distribution system. And this includes the additional REDs that were proposed. Yeah. One in the southern parts of Namibia, whatever the name will be, is immaterial for now. And then one for the central parts of Namibia. Yeah. Whatever the name will be, immaterial for now. And the regulator has been basically in the thick and thin of things in terms of assisting the establishment of these two remaining REDs. Yeah. The REDs for the southern part of Namibia is at an advanced stage as we speak. In fact, just this week there has been reference to the importance of establishing that RED by some residents that are in the southern parts of Namibia who have been saying, or who are saying, those residents that are countering the idea merely because they claim that they were not consulted directly themselves should look at the broader picture of things. Yeah. So that RED is at an advanced stage. The shareholders' agreements have been signed. And the parties that will form part of that RED, the majority are in agreement. With regards to the proposed RED for the central area, discussions are ongoing. Okay. The parties that ought to form part of that RED have been engaged. Okay. They are aware of the conversation. There are some concerns that have been raised as part of the conversation. And those are being attended to. And with regards to the RED responsible for the central parts of Namibia, there are also some sticky points that needs to be ironed out. But what I can share with confidence with your viewers is that conversations are certainly ongoing. Okay. And those parties who ought to form part of the proposed RED are aware and they are being engaged. Okay. And if we as a nation are to stand together and support these efforts to actually realize the resolution of that first EDI summit and subsequent EDI summits in completing the establishments of REDs, we would have achieved.
Yeah.
We would have achieved.
Okay.
You have pockets of areas in the central parts of Namibia, pockets of areas in the southern parts of Namibia that are struggling in terms of access to electricity and availability and affordability. And we are of the view that if consolidated services such as a RED is brought into these areas, things will change.
Okay.
Certainly.
Thank you very much. Well, Mr. Molale, it was good having you on the show this evening. Wish you a pleasant evening and all the best for your work going ahead.
Thank you, Matthias. Thank you for inviting the regulator. And we will extend that warm invitation to you at any time. We will accept it. The regulator is there for the Namibian nation. Our doors are open. We are a public institution.
Yeah.
So if you feel that you wish to or you need to welcome us back onto the evening review, we will certainly take this seat and have that conversation with the Namibian nation out there.
Thank you very much. Well, to our viewers, that's it from the Evening Review team. Have a pleasant evening. See you again tomorrow, same time, same place.